evening, everyone. I hope all is well. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are hosting another chat this evening to talk about our reopening plans and to share new information in regards to that plan. Joining me this evening is our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Jeff Gorman. And we also have Mr. Rick McCormick, who's in the background helping us to facilitate and will help us get to some of those questions. The last few chats we've had. Good evening, everyone. I hope all. This is the third or fourth of our chats, and we've had a lot of questions, and we've been trying to facilitate as many of those questions as possible. And in the time allotted in the cases up to now, we haven't been able to get to all of our questions on the chat. So we've been posting them after the conversations are concluded on the district website under our FAQ. We have a very robust link on our website for COVID information, and included in that is frequently asked questions. There are some common threads that we're finding in our questions, so we are grouping them together and obviously trying to answer them as succinctly as possible. I want to preface this by saying that our plan is well established, well developed, and takes into consideration all the guidelines from obviously the New York State Department of Education, the World Health Organization, and the CDC. So we've made updates and modifications to our plans and according to how those changes have come up. But most recently, we've been monitoring new information that has led us to kind of make a decision to go in a different direction. And that information is also provided on our website. So the CDC has shared new information about the rate of infection amongst schools that has children where schools have opened already. And that has given us some pause. We've also, after contemplating many of your questions, some of which we don't have answers to from staff and parents for that matter, we feel that we need more time to adequately prepare for opening. So last night I recommended to the board, which was approved, that we modify our reopening plan and go to a 100% remote learning method for the month of September. And then the plan at that point, based on what we know and understand today, will to ease into with a gradual phase in of our hybrid model. What that will mean is that we will take the month of September to get our devices all in. So there is some delay in getting our laptops or our iPads in time, because schools all across the country are ordering laptops and iPads, and suppliers are behind schedule. So we are certain that giving this extra time, we will be able to we'll have more opportunity to get these devices in. In addition to that, we are also going to be providing our teachers with greater opportunity to prepare. So over the last 2 weeks, we've been burning the midnight oil working on these plans. The governor released information about 2 weeks ago that required us to submit our plans and make sure those plans contain certain information related to some of those updates and some of those requirements. And part of our challenge is some of the planning that our teachers need to do. Our teachers are off, they're on holiday, they're on summer recess, and we don't have access to many of them in order to get some of this planning done that we wanted to do. So we have modified our school calendar. Our first day of school, where we will launch our remote learning method, is September 10th. And we will be in a remote learning modality until October, I think it's the 3rd, that first Monday in October. The first is on a Friday, and the second, I think, is on a Saturday in October. Yes, so October 5th will be our first full week where we will launch our hybrid model. And we'll be working over the next few weeks to let you know what that is. But this gives parents an opportunity to plan as well. I know many of you have been saying that you want more information, you need more information. We do need to get these surveys back so that we can continue our planning. But at every interval where we stop and assess the surveys that have been turned, the community is evenly split. About 50% of our people are ready to send their children back. About 50% of our parents believe that they want to keep their children home because they don't believe it is yet safe enough to send their students back. So while we recognize there is no answer that's going to be okay with everyone, we have decided that in the best interest of our staff and our students, we will delay opening our hybrid model and go into our distance learning program, which will launch on September 10th. And I'm going to have Dr. Gorman talk about that distance learning program, and then we're going to get right into some questions that are coming in on Facebook. Dr. Gorman, you want to just outline what the distance learning program is and spend a few minutes talking about synchronized and asynchronous, synchronous and asynchronous instructional programming?
Sure, Dr. Hamilton. Pleasure to be with you again. Third day going. I think we're going to go 5 days straight this week. I have been really rejuvenated today. I got to work with about 40 of our K-8 teachers and some the best experts around the country on putting together units of study using a backward plan based off of standards and all of our digital tools for the kids. And so in our distance learning program, students will have a weekly overview and they'll know what is their responsibility Monday through Friday. And what's actually nice about the distance learning or the virtual plan that is different than what happened from March to June is that they'll be, it'll be synchronized in the fact that you'll basically see your teacher every day and during the day. Wednesdays, we are still using a day for reaching out to students. And students will have assignments, of course, to do. So they'll be reading books. They'll be working on math lessons from our Envisions 2.0. They'll be working in Journeys and Scholastic, in the science tech books, watching videos from Discovery, creating different tasks. They're called performance tasks. That was something that we were really diving into with teachers today. So they'll have a weekly overview. And then what's nice about the distance learning model is that kids will have a morning meeting every day. So they'll see their teacher to start the day off for about 30 minutes. And now we're talking primarily K-8 or K-6, and then 7-12, sort of a little bit of a different model. But they'll see their teachers in the morning. They'll have an opening activity, a check-in with their teachers, and then they will dive into, say, a 40 or 60-minute block of time in literacy. And then that time will be split up through, okay, we're going to do a little bit of an overview or a mini lesson where I'm going to show you a video or you'll be looking at materials from last night. And then we'll be doing a group activity. We'll have different discussion topics. We'll use breakout rooms, and we'll do that throughout the day. What's really nice, at least from our standpoint, is it's easier to manage from us. So like when we say, let's take a lunch break, you know, the kids and the teachers, they go take their own lunch break. And so we don't have to worry about bringing other adults in to watch the students while the teachers take their break. And it really frees us up in the virtual world. One of the things that somebody brought up yesterday was, are all assignments due at 3 o'clock? No, not necessarily. And that's the nice part about the flexibility of being in a virtual environment. However, we will ask kids to be in school with their teachers daily from 8 to 3 o'clock, basically, or depending on school hours. So that format will definitely take hold, and we will script it out per grade, per class. Yesterday, Dr. Hamilton, we talked about an orientation and teachers reaching out to their classes and welcoming them. We've talked about virtual back to school nights and a whole other plethora of things to engage kids and basically try to replicate what we're doing in school, but actually ramp it up a bit. And the enthusiasm by the teachers today was really genuine, and they were very, very much ready to go and to attack next generation's learning standards with the kids and use a lot of these really neat digital tools that we're starting to get used to. Just so you know, Dr. Hamilton, our professional development team is out there conducting workshops right now for our staff, voluntary workshops twice a day for the next 2 weeks. So we're trying to get our teachers ready to go and give them tools that they need to engage our kids.
Awesome. I also want to acknowledge one of our extremely dedicated staff members, Dr. Gail White-Wallace. She's logged on this evening and she's trying to help get to some of those questions that we may not be able to get to in the chat. So thank you so much, Dr. Gail White-Wallace, for being on with us.
She was in there today getting dirty with the teachers. She was working on a pre-K unit and she was really into it. They were really excited about using the backward design and taking all the learning they were getting today.
Awesome. We're fortunate to have her. So let's get right into some of those questions that are popping up. So yes, we are going to be in virtual. I see you, Erica Peterson. Good to see you this evening. Thank you for logging on. So we are definitely going to get into trying to answer some of these questions. So one of the questions I see is will all schools be going on a virtual platform? Yes, all schools will be going on a virtual platform. Those students that are assigned to the new Mandela building will also be on a virtual platform. And this actually works out well for Mandela because we are still having some challenges with getting that building ready. We do not yet have our certificate of occupancy because the stair tower is still under construction. But actually this works out very well because by the time we plan to open, we should have that CO in place and that building should be up and ready. So that was actually just happened coincidentally that we were able to time that accordingly. So Mr. McCormick, what questions do you see that we can respond to?
Thank you for joining us again, Dr. Hamilton, and hosting this great event for our community. One of the questions that I just saw pop up is, how is the district's moving to a completely remote environment for September? How does that impact some of our community partners like Friendship for Tots and Our Lady of Victory Schools programs?
That's a great question. So we have experienced some cuts in federal aid, and the two things are not necessarily related, but we should take an opportunity to talk about that. If you've been following along, you know that school districts across the state and across the country, for that matter, are faced with potential budget cuts because the federal government has not come through to support some of the unplanned and unanticipated costs associated with COVID and making appropriate accommodations for schools. We have just been notified that some of those cuts are imminent in Mount Vernon, and we have had to reduce some of our pre-K seats accordingly. So those CBOs may be impacted by their enrollment. We are really working to make sure our CBOs can still thrive and survive in this environment. So we have not decimated any particular programs and tried to be even keel across the board in terms of the kinds of reductions that we need to make without sacrificing the ability for these programs to continue to function in some fashion.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. Dr. Gorman, can you explain how virtual learning will look at the middle school level? Who will those teachers be? And will those same teachers remain with those students once schools reopen for the hybrid model comes October?
Sure, Mr. McCormick. So in the middle school and the high school, 7 to 12, we're more departmentalized, right? So in the morning, you go to your math class, then you go to your English class and you see different teachers. So students, what's nice, at least on our end right now, and I think Dr. Hamilton, you talked about this last night at the board meeting, there were so many different variables to open on September 1, right? We're not sure how many people are electing hybrid, how many are electing virtual, how many staff members and their location. And there were just so many variables in scheduling this this double schools. It's really a double schedule, right? It's a virtual school and then the hybrid.
Technically.
yeah. And then the hybrid is broken in half as well, right? So now that we don't have to do that, and we're not saying we're not doing it, we're doing it now for October, and we're trying to cut down those variables. But what's nice about it is the schedules are basically ready in our student information system. They've been done. And so teachers have their class lists. We haven't released them yet because we're tweaking things and want to get everything tight. But a middle school kid will get a schedule and he'll be expected to follow his schedule and based on the times that he would normally have class time. And so a lesson might look like the teacher showing up and doing an overview. They might have a class discussion online. They might engage in a Socratic seminar. They might have a writing assignment. They might be watching a video and commenting on an online discussion. but it will be synchronous and asynchronous, but it will be time on task like a school day. And that is a little bit different than our March to June. This actually replicates what we were doing in the summer. And from all the feedback that we've gotten, Dr. Hamilton, the summer was highly successful in the virtual environment.
Yes, I was going to comment on that. So our summer program has essentially become our template for rolling out our virtual learning program for September. So if you were able to participate, if your child was able to participate in the summer program, which has been extraordinarily successful by having a structured routine in place where teachers and students are interacting on a regular basis, you have been exposed to what the new fall season will look like. I just want to circle back to that pre-K question. Our pre-K students and our CBOs will be in person. So right now, our CBOs are planning to operate with in-person instruction across the city. I also know that there are a lot of questions from special ed, and we've been providing special sessions just for special ed parents who have very specific questions about services. We're really very pleased to report that we've been doing, I think the special ed department has been doing a very good job with making certain those related services or stipulations in students' individual IEPs or educational plans are in fact being delivered. And we will continue to make that commitment. I had a conversation recently, as recent as today, regarding transportation, and we're still working on that. We have some partnerships and some contractual agreements with some private transportation companies that we're looking at, so we can get that ramped up on time. But any service that is required in an IEP for a student with special needs will still be delivered. And you can rest assured of that. In some instances, just like we are in a regular classroom environment, sometimes those services fall behind simply by virtue of the availability of service providers and how many students they need to schedule, but they ultimately still have an obligation to make those sessions up and will continue to do so.
Dr. Hamilton, a lot of parents are obviously concerned about what the fall is going to look like and getting ready. Can you touch a little bit about when school supplies will be available, school supply lists, and when those students might find out who their teachers are?
Great question. I directed principals today to begin to release those class lists so that teachers can reach out to their families and begin to share that information with them. So you should expect those lists to come out at any moment now. The fact that we just decided last night and the board approved going into a hybrid, into the remote learning, we no longer now have to wait for all the surveys to come back to figure out how to schedule students. We still need those surveys, so I can't stress that enough. If you haven't sent that survey back regarding your preference for a hybrid model, please do so as soon as possible. This will help inform our direction moving forward. But teachers should be getting their class schedules immediately and reaching out to you accordingly and letting you know what's on those lists. I can tell you that students will be asked to bring masks to school. We're recommending a 3-layer mask, 3-ply mask, but any cloth mask will do. We're also recommending that students bring bottled water with them to school. Now, of course, we have fountains in our schools where students can refill their bottles. We are not going to allow students to access the traditional fountain with a faucet where students have to put their mouth toward the fountain in order to drink water. Those will be disconnected and disabled. So that's why it is so important for you to stock up on bottled water so students can come to school with bottled water. And again, they will be able to refill, but most of our buildings only have one of those newer machines where you can refill those bottles. So bringing those bottles is important. And of course, I can't stress enough how important it is for you. If you haven't already purchased hand sanitizer for your students, you should begin to do so. We will have hand sanitizer available when we get back in operation in October. But for right now, you have an opportunity to begin to collect that supply so it'll be able to last you through the year once we launch our hybrid models in October.
Dr. Hamilton, as parents are getting ready to transition to this remote learning program, a lot of them have anxiety about it being able to meet their child's needs. What are we doing to help those families transition to this remote learning environment?
We will continue to provide, and if you tuned in on our other sessions, we are going to be offering a parent university where you will be able to get training on how to be your child's home teacher while you're providing instruction and aiding instruction. And this is really important for our younger learners. Our older students will be able to log on and complete their assignments fairly independently. But our younger students, our first, second, third grade students, they're going to need somebody to help them log on and to help them navigate information. And we will be providing online training for our parents so that you will be able to be as efficient and effective with helping your children maximize their learning as much as possible. That schedule will be forthcoming. I looked at the content yesterday or last night. And I will approve that so we can move forward, and you should be getting the date on when those courses will be available for you, and you can decide when and how that best accommodates your lifestyle and your work schedule.
Dr. Hamilton, I have some of those topics up. You want me to go over them real quick?
Sure.
Sure. So some of the classes will be what will teaching, learning, and leadership look like in September 2020? What's all the fuss about information for families to support virtual learning? Safety during COVID-19 practices and processes for physical distancing, cleaning and sanitizing, buses and burgers, an inside look at transportation and food services in 2020. And then we were looking at some of our targeted focused workshops, positive family communication and discipline for families in this challenging time. Let's talk this out, understanding teenage language and culture. The ABCs of social media, understanding communication technologies, cell phone, texting, social media platforms, the 7 critical skills at any age for college, career, and beyond, creating rituals and routines for academic success at any age, and then literature circles, making learning fun at home through story time, sing-alongs, and storytelling. So that's just the beginning, I think, of a really robust menu for our parents and families.
Let me just go back to that CBO question, because I think there may be some confusion around that. The OLV and West Cobb and Friendship programs, just our CBOs, if I'm understanding this message correctly, are in person. Our district pre-K is for distance learning. Is that correct? Am I repeating that?
Yeah, as we know it today, Dr. Hamilton, which you know, things are changing quickly.
And pre-K, we are providing supplies for our pre-K students. Dr. Gail White-Wallace just sent me that information. I do see a question on here about registering your 5-year-old for kindergarten. If your child is eligible for full-day kindergarten, you can do that online. That information and registration process is outlined on the district website, and it lets you know what information, not just our pre-K, but any registration, not just kindergarten, but any new student that needs to register. That information is on our district website, so you know what you need to bring, what you need to supply, and what needs to happen in order for you to appropriately register your child for school in September.
Dr. Gorman, will the district be offering our Atlas classes virtually come September?
Oh, absolutely. So yesterday we answered a question similar to that with our avid tutors. And so the Gifted and Talented program through the Atlas is in full motion as well, and easier in a lot of ways to manage virtually than face-to-face. Kids can really, have a schedule set for them by the Atlas teachers that says, I will meet you in a video conference class or on Schoology, access these materials at a certain specific time and schedule. So 100%, those related services such as RTI and academic intervention services are all in full motion as well.
I did see a question on here. Well, it wasn't a question, it was a statement. A parent is stating that not every family has two parents. And I think I prefaced this by saying there is no right solution that's going to work for everybody. And I need you to understand that 50% of our parents want in-person learning, 50% of our parents say they want remote learning. So obviously we can't do both. So we are doing what we believe is in the best interest of all students. I offer my apologies to whoever's on the other side of this decision, but clearly there is absolutely no way we can satisfy every request that we've received because our district is divided. So we've looked at the data, we've looked at patterns and trends across the state and across the country, and you will actually see more and more schools actually deciding to go remote every day. More and more schools are understanding the complexity of trying to open, with there being so many issues about ventilation systems, about how now children, particularly children of color, are being coming up positive for COVID and how that's being impacted. How many teachers are requesting opportunity to stay at home because they have pre-existing conditions or have family members that have pre-existing conditions. It has just created a very, very complicated situation. So again, I know it's not ideal for everyone. There's no way it can be, but this is what we believe is in the best interest of our students and staff.
Dr. Hamilton, I was listening today that in Richmond, Virginia, 80% of the cases come from communities of color similar to ours. And so I think that health and safety has always been our guiding mantra as we move forward. And like you said, it's not an easy decision. And but using that premise of safety and health and family and community, that's the driving force. And we know there are competing forces with that. But I know that it has been a big part of our decision-making process.
Yes. So I see another question on here, and Rick, please continue to read the questions. I'm not catching them all. I'm just trying to work with two screens here, about students being able to meet their teachers virtually. So yes, we will have a student orientation day where teachers will have their Zoom meetings and get students acclimated with expectations and talk to students and their parents about how to function in Zoom or Schoology and what the expectations are regarding their schedule, what supplies you need. The schedule will provide appropriate breaks. We know that our younger learners are not going to sit on the computer from 8 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon straight through and not have some kind of break. So there will be appropriate breaks in the schedule for our students to have some respite and to retool and get a break. We will also be offering breakfast and lunch pickup at all of our sites so that students will have the opportunity to grab their meals during the course of the day. Right now, we are offering it at 4 or 5 sites in our district, and our goal in September, while we are in this remote environment, is to try to have lunches available at all of our buildings for ease of pickup. So students can run into their neighborhood school, pick up their breakfast and lunch, and get back home for their instruction.
Mr. McCormick, did you see that last comment about our families that can't necessarily read and speak English? We had talked about that a lot today in our communication plan.
Absolutely. We are in the process of scheduling, and our English language learners and our non-English speaking families will be receiving an email maybe later this evening or first thing tomorrow with a Zoom link for a private meeting with some of our Spanish speaking and non-English speaking staff to ensure that that information gets conveyed to them as well.
There will continue to be special ed meetings scheduled. The next special ed meeting will be Friday at 10 o'clock. I thought that was supposed to be at 1 o'clock.
We're at 1 o'clock, Dr. Hamilton.
You guys are at 1 o'clock.
Okay, so our next special ed meeting is Friday at 10 o'clock. So please log on Friday if you need more information or if your questions are specific to special education, where we will have our special ed assistant director online providing that information, who knows the intimate program and services and knows all the service providers, and be able to answer your questions far more intelligently than I can.
Dr. Hamilton, looking at the feed, there's been a lot of parents who are concerned that due to technology problems or work schedules, parents may not be able to help their children complete assignments during the prescribed school day. What kind of flexibility is the district planning for those types of families? And are we looking into working with our teachers to have some teachers available after hours for the same type of work?
You know, that actually came up last night. So a couple of people asked me, am I open to having teachers with some kind of flex schedule? And we cannot require, because of contract language that currently exists, we cannot require teachers to flex their day. Many teachers will do that willingly. Many of our teachers when we had to go into this process in this spring, made themselves available across the clock in order to accommodate their students. And we're at the goodwill of teachers to be able to do so. But we cannot require that teachers avail themselves after their contractual workday. Having said that, however, I am completely open to being able to negotiate terms with our bargaining units for any teacher that wants to have a flex day where they may be available to provide instruction for students after hours. Yes, there will be flexibility in terms of when assignments are due. We know that many students will not be able to complete their assignments. There's a model that we're using called the reverse classrooms, where students will get their content earlier on and be able to work on it and then come to class with their teachers, having the information at their fingertips, being able to ask questions, being able to talk about, I had a challenge with this particular problem or this particular question, or I didn't understand how to respond to this. And then teachers will be able to provide support that students need in that environment.
All right, Dr. Hamilton. It's always a question. Are we going to be taking student temperatures when students return to school for in-person learning in October?
Initially, we were not going to do that. The CDC advises against it, and we were following guidelines from the CDC. They were particularly against the handheld devices where you hold the gun up to students and you take their temperature. I'll actually show you, I have one here. And what we're looking to do is to purchase devices where, so this is the device that the CDC actually warns against, saying that it is not a good experience for students psychologically to have this device pointed at their heads every day. So we are looking into purchasing the units where you will be able to scan a group of children as they walk through the door and provide them with a temperature, and it will give an indication if a student is coming through with some kind of temperature. And we will continue to have our isolation room. In our isolation room, our students will, any student that becomes COVID, appears to have symptoms related to COVID, will go to this isolation room, which is a part of the state plan, which is required. And in this isolation room, students will essentially be quarantined in the building until a parent can pick them up because they may display some kind of symptoms that are COVID related. Does not mean that they have COVID, and it doesn't mean that we are diagnosing children as having COVID. It means that they're either displaying a symptom or a cough or something that the CDC says could be an indication of COVID. And we really need parents to understand how important it is that you are available to pick your child up if they get sent to that isolation room. And that isolation room is different than the nurse's office. The nurse's office will continue to be there for people who fall, kids who fall and scrape their knee and need a Band-Aid or just have other kinds of things that warrant the support of our school nurses. The isolation room will be specifically for students who display symptoms that may be COVID related and they need to be isolated. Their space will be large enough for students to socially distance while they're in this isolation room so that if there is some potential for exposure, we are following the CDC guidelines to keep children separate.
Could you guys talk a little bit about the essential workers camp that has been hosted at homes? Is that a daycare? Is that a virtual learning environment? Touch on that a little bit.
So I don't know that I would call it a camp because students are involved in instruction, but we were directed by the state when COVID first started, when schools were closed, to provide an instructional program for our essential workers. Essential workers were our healthcare providers, people who worked in transportation, people who worked in the trucking or transportation industry, and we provided a service. We actually provided more than was required by the state because we opened our program earlier and that program remained open until 6 o'clock, which was beyond the course of the school day. We will continue to provide some kind of service. It will not be as robust or the hours will not be as extended as that program was. But For our essential workers, we will be able to provide some form of service, and we'll further develop that during this period of time while we're in remote learning. Now, for the month of September, when we are in our remote learning model, before we get to our hybrid model in October, it is very likely that we will still offer the same program that existed at Holmes Elementary School, but we will have to get further guidance. And I'll be able to speak to that more articulately in the next day or so when I get guidance from the state about how that will be funded.
Can somebody talk a little bit about what supports and protections are in place for some of our high school seniors to ensure that they don't slip through the cracks during the pandemic and they're able to meet all the requirements for graduation?
So we will continue to, and our guidance counselors are already working on reviewing transcripts, looking at how students have selected their courses. In fact, our high school guidance counselors have done a very good job with monitoring where students are relative to completing their 22 credits and course requirements in order to satisfy graduation requirements. Even in this pandemic, our guidance counselors are still working their regular schedule, still working full time, checking in with their students. I know that students have already started calling counselors about their schedules and making changes on their schedules based on courses that they want to take now. And since the high school now has its IB program, which we're very, very proud of, the International Baccalaureate program at Mount Vernon High School, we are finding that there are students who are requesting that course, that track as well. So I don't see any reason to believe that students will fall off the grid in terms of completing their high school requirements and taking the appropriate courses and getting the help they need to complete their college applications.
Dr. Hamilton, also parents that continue to be concerned about receiving devices from the district. What is the plan for getting out those devices and updating the ones that some kids already have from last year?
Yes, those devices do need to be updated, and you'll be getting information about that very soon. Now that we know what direction we're going in, you'll start getting information in the next day or so about that. We have switched some funding from our supplies and material lines to equipment lines to purchase our laptops so that every student, in the spring, our goal was to just make sure every family had one. And we quickly learned that one may not have been enough in families with more than one child based on the workload that children were experiencing. So we have made a committed effort to have a laptop for every child in our district. Now, the one thing that we cannot control is when those devices will be shipped to us. They're coming in every day in some form or fashion. So I can't tell you when we will have every device in because we're at the mercy of the suppliers where we are ordering these devices. But we have made accommodations so that every child in our district will have a device. The distribution will most likely happen at the school, so it is more streamlined. This spring, we centralized it and we had everybody come into one location. And we found that it would be more effective and more efficient to have the distributions occur at the school site where principals know students and their teachers know students and their families. So you'll be getting that information very soon as well. We have also seen there's a large number of people who have indicated they don't need a device on their survey. And that's actually very surprising for me. But if you have not completed the survey to say you need device or you need help with getting access to Wi-Fi, you need to communicate that on your school survey, your student survey, so that we can make sure that we make that connection for you. The survey is not an anonymous survey, so we're able to tell who's completing that survey, which student in particular needs support. So please get those surveys back. It is vital. We're not just collecting data for the sake of having it. We need to know what supports you need, who needs technology, who needs a device. We've purchased hotspots for many of our families who may need them. We're continuing our partnership with our suppliers like Comcast and Xfinity to make sure that those families who need Wi-Fi will be able to get it.
Dr. Gorman or Dr. Hamilton, can you talk a little bit about the SATs and other standardized tests? Are they going to be offered in August and this year?
I just responded to that in the comment area. I know we have somebody's asking about the August SATs. I want to give specific answers to this, Dr. Hamilton. So I just texted Dr. Smith, who oversees a lot of our testing. She'll get me that information. She hasn't responded yet, but we'll get that information out as soon as possible. But our plan is we are in constant contact with college boards on giving access to our kids for standardized testing as well.
One of our other visitors on Facebook mentioned a guidance counselor was laid off. Can you guys just touch a little bit about some of the staff cuts that recently occurred and what precipitated those?
We have been directed to cut our budget by $7.6 million. And of course, when you're getting to those kinds of numbers, you're looking at staff positions. We have tried to keep cuts as far away from children as possible. And that means that we have to do more with less. So there have been some staff reductions across the district. Many of our staff who have multiple certifications have been able to be rehired in other positions, because while we are eliminating some positions, we still have vacancies. We still have people who have resigned, retired, accepted positions in other districts, moved on to administrative positions, for example. So if a teacher in our district was, let's say, a reading teacher, but they had certification as a special ed teacher, and we had a vacancy in special ed, we were able to rehire those teachers in another area, such as special education. So we have really been working to reduce the number of staff members who are not employed by putting them in other positions. There have been some reductions at the guidance level, but those cuts have been very minimal with guidance counselors in particular.
Dr. Hamilton, are you able to touch on some of the safety protocols that the district has implemented and will implement as we do gear up for a return to in-person learning?
Well, of course, we have PPE in classrooms. Teachers have asked if they can wear scrubs, which I have no objection to. We will be asking all of our students to wear masks, all of our staff as well to wear masks while they're in the workplace and school. We will have hand sanitizing material in every classroom in the district. We have a disinfection cycle in place so that classrooms will be cleaned and disinfected in an appropriate manner. We have ramped up how our bathrooms will be cleaned. So bathrooms will be cleaned as often as necessary, but no less than every 2 hours. We will have people monitoring how many children are in the bathroom at one time. So we will be deploying staff members to supervise hallway traffic, to supervise how many students are in and out of the bathrooms, so that we can make sure that our cleaning cycle coincides with the frequency of usage throughout the buildings.
What about MERV filters? Something about a MERV filter and their grades, or do we have those in the district?
We had a long conversation today about filters, and that's beyond my area of expertise in terms of the grade of filters. But I do know that all of our unit ventilators have been updated. They are those that were in disrepair, even though they're new. They're being updated as we speak. I know filters are being replaced throughout the district. We have purchased filters to make sure that there is cool air coming from outside the building and circulating in the building to make sure that the air is as clean as possible.
Dr. Hamilton, a couple of parents have asked questions about vaccinations. Do you anticipate, or do you have any thoughts on whether or not the district or schools in general will require students to have a COVID vaccine if it's available and when it's available?
That's interesting. I have mixed feelings about that on a personal level, but professionally, we have not been given any guidance on whether or not students will be allowed or will be required to get the COVID vaccination. My gut tells me, yes, it will be a required vaccination. That requirement will come down from the state, not from the district. That's not something that I think we are looking to do. My concern is how well are these vaccinations or inoculations have been tested. And I know there's a rush to get them out. I'm personally concerned about how people may react to those vaccinations and what's in them, frankly. So I don't quite know what the answer to that will be.
we're bringing on the Mandela School coming online. Can you talk a little bit about how that's going to look and how those students who are registered or zoned for that school will be able to obtain their devices and meet their teachers and become acclimated with that new facility?
We will most likely have that distribution occur at central office or an alternate site because we do not want people over there. Obviously, it's an active construction site right now, and we need that construction team working as rampantly as possible in order to get that building up to par and ready for opening. So those students, there is a principal that's been hired, staff have already been assigned, students have already been assigned to that building. And when we get to the point of distribution, that principal, Mr. Varicaro, will be reaching out to his parents and staff members, and we will be coordinating where those devices will be distributed. Most likely it will be for Mandela School exclusively. Most likely that distribution center will be at the Ed Center at 165 North Columbus Avenue.
Some other questions that are coming up. What is grading going to look like in a virtual environment and a hybrid environment?
Can I take that, Dr. Hamilton? Sure.
Yeah.
So one of the goals is to get grading to a pre-COVID environment through our virtual learning process. So while the tasks and the assignments won't replicate per se in the class, they will change, and so they will be more dynamic, more digital, different types of assessments. That's one of the things that we're working with our principals and our staff to be able to assess properly. One of the things that so we expect to use our current grading system as well. But one of the lessons that we learned from March to June was that families are exhibiting conditions based off of some hardships and conditions based off of the virus. And so we want to be responsive and work with those families. And last year we were able to utilize an incomplete and a pass-fail concept. That is not our standard at all. We will be back to numeric and standards-based grades, but we will have that ability to be flexible with some of our students if certain situations occur at home. We do plan on assessing our students through our iReady system at the end of September. We want to make sure we're able to get a feel for where all of our students are, so we could assess and close any learning gaps that have occurred and provide the right type of instruction. We'll also be using various different types of common assessments also to grade.
I see one of the comments, Mandela students should get personal delivery of devices. I don't even know how that's feasible. How can we get personal delivery to 300, almost 300 students? We don't have the manpower to do that. So that's not feasible or practical.
Dr. Hamilton, is the district engaged in a district-wide re-registration this year as we have in?
No, we're not doing it. We are not. That was disastrous. We're not doing a district-wide re-registration. Well, that's it. That's all I can say about that.
Well, it wasn't disastrous. We got a lot of people re-registered. It was just
we did, but it was a lot.
Dr. Hamilton, one of the parents is concerned about some of the concerns that the teachers have shared with you. Do you want to just talk a little bit about some of the shared concerns that you're hearing from our Facebook feed tonight and that you heard with some of our teachers and staff members earlier this week?
They're pretty consistent. Staff members are concerned about their health and coming back to school. And if you can imagine, if you're back at work and you're standing in front of 20, 25, 30 kids, you have to be concerned about exposure at 30 different times during the course of the day. And those are legitimate concerns. So eventually we have to get back to some degree of normalcy, and we just need to acknowledge that. But in the meantime, having this additional 30 days gives us the opportunity to look at some protocols that will help mitigate some of those concerns. But teachers are concerned about PPE, which we have plenty of. We will be able to support students. Of course, we're asking students to bring their masks with them. But if a student drops their mask during the course of the day, particularly our younger learners, if they drop their mask or the mask gets dirty or soiled, we'll be able to replace that mask. And staff members are also asked to wear their own mask to school. We're not pushing the uniform this year. I know that So many stores are still closed, and those that are open, the supply is limited. We are encouraging students to be in uniform this year, but they are not required. But if you have a uniform, particularly a uniform from last year that students haven't outgrown, you should definitely use them. But getting back to the original question, many of the same concerns that parents have raised, staff members have raised as well, and that looks at how safe is it to come back. There is no way I can tell you 100% that there is nothing, we've done everything we can do. There's no way I can assure you that every person that walks in that door is going to be COVID negative or negative for the COVID virus. I cannot give you that assurance, and I'm not going to represent that I can. There is no 100% safeguard that I can offer you other than staying home for the first 30 days, which is what we're doing, that will limit and contain exposure. And that's why we opted to go that way.
Dr. Hamilton, or Dr. Gorman, I guess, would be some of the concerns from the springtime where Schoology often had a difficult time, not oftentimes, on occasion had difficulty keeping up with the demand of our parents. What is being done to ensure that Schoology won't have those same types of issues coming into the fall and the spring of this year?
So, Mr. McCormick, the world got slammed in March last year, and that there were adjustments that had to be made relatively quickly, from learning management systems to video conferencing programs to every software out there. The good news is that we have a really good partnership with Schoology. They are addressing those issues regularly. We do not expect the same outages at all, but they simply were not getting that type of business. And so there was an adjustment. Most of the time they were just updates. So we do find that Schoology has been a very effective platform for us. And we will obviously work through it, but technology, there are workarounds with technology, and that's actually part of critical thinking for students. When something doesn't work and they have to think about the go around to get there, we will communicate with our kids. So if Schoology's down, then expect an email. We will do everything we can to provide a continuous flow of education for our kids.
Absolutely. Dr. Hamilton, will staff be mandated to be teaching from the school buildings in September?
As it stands right now, we are expecting staff members to return to their buildings where they will conduct their instruction from their classroom, where their devices and smart boards and everything they need is in place. And I know there are people who are hesitant about doing that, but without having students in the building, your risk of exposure is dramatically reduced. So it is my expectation that teachers will deliver their instruction from their work site.
Earlier in the broadcast, you mentioned that we'll be offering a parent university to help some of our parents navigate online learning. There's a number of third-party providers who are gearing up to help some of our families who aren't able to stay home with their students. Will that same training be available to some of those third-party providers in the city of Mount Vernon?
Those third-party providers that are going to be making money off of COVID should use their resources to provide their own training. So we're not taking that responsibility on. This training is for our parents and anyone who is out, starting their own business, which I think is a great idea. If you have a business opportunity you want to start, feel free to do so. But the district will not be providing the training for private companies.
Trying to see what else we got here. Still questions about device pickup and childcare. I think one of the things that's been missed over these last few broadcasts, you and Dr. Gorman have worked with your team incredibly hard these last few months. You want to just talk to the folks watching about what has gone into the planning and the development of the reopening plan that you guys had to submit? I think that that's an important thing for our community to understand too.
So Dr. Gorman and I have been working literally around the clock, 7 days a week, talking over the weekend. Dr. Gorman I've asked Dr. Gorman to lead a task force in the district comprised of multiple stakeholders, including parents, teachers, students, support staff, and administrators. I have served on the state task force, and we've been sharing information between our two entities. And of course, I'm also in a group with neighboring superintendents. So we've been sharing best practices. I've also been interacting and in conversations with superintendents across the country and even beyond to get experience, share their experiences and get some information about their learnings, and that has helped to inform our planning. So we've taken all of this information and put it together. And then of course, when the governor gave us direction, we started tweaking our information to make sure that our plans did in fact reflect what we thought the governor was looking for, and it does. And then we've gone a step beyond that in many areas because we have put elements in our plan that was not necessarily required. Of course, the state provided minimal expectations, and we have strived to exceed state expectations in many areas. So that's been what the process has been for creating our plan. And then when the CDC comes out with new information about rates of infection and how children are responding to those rates of infections, we've put additional protocols in place. So it's been a multifaceted, very complex process to create a plan for opening schools. And even with all of that being said, and with all of that effort being exerted, it is still not a perfect plan, because at the end of the day, parents and teachers want to know, will my child be safe? Will I be safe? Am I at any risk? And yes, there is always going to be a risk of exposure, just like there's risk if you go to Stop and Shop, or if you go to McDonald's, or if you go to Dunkin' Donuts, there is still some risk that you assume. And there is going to be some risk that you assume with coming back to school. And whether we come back in September or October or November or January or whenever that happens, until there is a cure for COVID, there will always be a risk of exposure. And the best we can do is use the resources that have been provided to us by the CDC and the World Health Organization so that we are protecting ourselves by wearing our masks, washing our hands, and avoiding people, large groups, and maintaining social distancing. And my rule of thumb is we have measured every classroom. We know how many students can fit in a classroom based on the square footage, and giving allowance for 6 feet for separation by at least 6 feet. And in most instances, even greater than that. Some of our classrooms are larger, and particularly in our newer buildings, and some of our older buildings, the classes are smaller, so the capacity will be smaller. If parents are not vaccinating their children, will the district provide remote learning still? That's a great question. And the bottom line is, if the state requires that students be vaccinated, they will have to be vaccinated. And if parents choose not to exercise that, then what they are effectively saying is that they are not going to send their children back to school. The state, we are not at this point, and again, laws could change, but at this point, we are not permitted to have children in our school who have not had the inoculations that the state requires students to have. So if the COVID vaccination, when it is done, is optional, then it's optional and it's not an issue for us. But if it becomes a mandate, then parents will be expected to follow that mandate. We will not be able to provide exceptions to that mandate.
Dr. Hamilton, what level of accountability will our teachers see as we go into a remote learning environment to ensure that they're holding up their end of the bargain and making sure that they're delivering the instruction that they're supposed to?
Well, that's part of why I want teachers to come back and deliver instruction in the classroom, because they will be able to be observed by their principals or vice principals or other content area supervisors. Teachers will be able to be evaluated based on observation data that would be available to us. So I think for that reason, there is a much larger degree of accountability for our staff. And that's not to say that our staff needs policing, because we know that we have staff members who will go above and beyond every single day. I've seen teachers visiting kids' homes over the spring and conducting their own visits to make sure that their children are all right. So I honor and I celebrate those dedicated people. But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to monitor instruction and make sure our students are getting everything they need. And that's what we're looking to do. Our principals are there to provide support, supervision, and administration of our teachers and support staff. And it is certainly easier to do that when people are in a school building versus being at home.
Is there a difference between remote learning and homeschooling? And if so, can you talk about what the importance of that distinction is?
Remote learning is your decision. In this case, is not even an option, but remote learning is when children remain home, they access their content and they interact with their teachers in a digital environment. Homeschooling is when the parent has made a decision to disenroll that child from school and assumes total responsibility for their education. There is information on our website if people want to homeschool, but you do need to understand if you elect to homeschool your child, you are disenrolling them from the Mount Vernon City School District, and you are assuming total responsibility for developing their curriculum, for delivering curriculum, and making sure that they meet state expectations for what they need to know and be able to do by the end of their respective grade level.
Again, can we just talk a little bit more about the flexibility that parents will have with submitting assignments? There's a parent right now that said that during the spring, they would often do a lot of the assigned work on her days off from work, be it Thursday and Friday or Monday and Tuesday. How will that kind of flexibility play into the fall schedule?
It will vary based on grade level, of course, and teachers will customize their assignment due dates accordingly. But just the way the reverse classroom works is teachers provide the units of study in advance and students are able to work independently. So let's just say, by way of example, if I'm a classroom teacher and I post my unit of study on Friday, well, then on Monday, students will come to my session, my Zoom or Schoology sessions, and they will have done the background work and come in asking questions and being able to facilitate high engagement of cognitive development as they inquire about what they read, what they learned, or what they did not acquire from that lesson so that teachers can reteach based on student need. There will be tremendous flexibility when assignments are due. And even this spring, I know I got information from parents because there were some teachers who were being sticklers about having assignments due at a certain time. And it was difficult for some of I even heard from students for that matter. There were students who wrote to me and says, I can't get to my assignment until 8 or 9 at night. I can't turn it in by 3 o'clock. And it is our expectations that teachers will extend that courtesy to our students because of circumstances that vary from family to family. When parents want to be there to help their students and they may not be able to do that all day long. I am very sensitive to the fact that I know that parents will not be able to sit down with their children in front of a computer from 8 to 3, particularly if you're a working parent. And even if you're not, that's a lot for a parent to do and still have to run your home and function. But we have to make the best of a bad situation for all of us. But we will expect that our teachers will be as tolerant and understanding and as flexible as possible to ensure that our students are successful.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. I'm looking at the time. You want some more? You want to go?
I'm scrolling through. I'm actually logged on as well, and I'm scrolling through, and I think we've gotten just about all of them. I see some common threads on here.
Dr. Hamilton, I know we continue to our communication team after our sessions. They go through the transcript and they do put together an updated frequently asked questions. That's happened each of our sessions this week and will continue to do so tonight. So if we missed something today, please check our reopening page. We are trying very vigorously to get people answers and information, and it's being posted regularly on our reopening page on our website.
And I do want to just respond. I see a couple of questions about guidance counselors not answering their phones right now. Guidance counselors are away for the summer. All of our teachers and guidance counselors are 10-month employees. So unfortunately, if you're calling them on their office lines, if they're not answering and picking up their messages, 9 times out of 10, it's because they're not in the office. Now, people may elect to come in voluntarily. I know when I was a classroom teacher, I was always in during the course of the summer and fixing my classrooms, and many of our teachers do that. But not returning your phone call does not mean that they're not attentive. What it most likely means is they're not at work right now because it's summertime. All right, well, I thank you all for tuning in tonight. I hope you found this information fruitful. I'm saying it now for the fourth time during the course of this call. I know it's not ideal. I know that it puts some people in a very compromised position. And I know there are other facets of our community that may be relieved that we have decided to go in this direction. It's the best option we have right now for the circumstances and conditions that we are faced with all across this country and this state. I encourage you to follow the news, follow rates of infection, follow data put out by the CDC, and be informed. We will continue to give you as much information as we can, as timely as possible. We made this decision last night. I sent out a robocall this morning so that parents could begin to develop plans if you need to, for what childcare will look like for you in this environment if you are going to be required to return to work or if you're already back at work. We will continue to try to sort through all of these nuances as best we can. And I offer my apologies for anyone who this plan may be an imposition, but I hope you understand the position of the school district and what we are faced with as we try to accommodate our students and our staff. So I hope that you be well. Know that I am thinking about you. I am praying for you. And I want you all to be safe and be well. So good night. And thank you again for being a part of our Facebook Live information session.